Hey guys, Solazar here with episode 4, which is the last of the generator installation series. Before we get started, just want to say that my heart goes out to those in Texas and Louisiana and other areas that were impacted by the winter storm last week. Personally, we had a little bit of damage from ice and snow that couldn't be avoided from a buildup, but overall we were prepared and we were ready for the storm and what it was throwing at us. If you were one of those people that were shocked when the trouble found you, and then you probably felt the effects of the storm pretty hard, and I'm sorry for that. And I'm hoping that this video is something that can help you in the future. And that's the purpose of us making these videos, and a lot of the other folks on the YouTube channels that do this. We're wanting to help you guys be prepared so you're not shocked when trouble hits you, because most people that are prepared for it, they expect it and prioritize it. It's not a question of if, it's when. And so they're ready. And that's what we want to help you better get prepared for here. Had a lot of questions about different things around like natural gas freezing. Texas experienced a pretty substantial freeze associated with their natural gas plant. And most of that was out of the, from the wellhead side coming out of the ground where the moisture was actually freezing. Once it's compressed and put into the lines, it's generally not going to freeze. I can't think of any reason unless you had a moisture leak somehow into it, but by and large, that's not something that you're going to encounter. And as far as fuel, generators don't help much if you are running a gasoline generator and you didn't obtain fuel prior to the storm. And most of these, whether it's a hurricane or a snowstorm or things like this, you've got enough notice that it's coming if you're paying attention to be prepared and get the fuel for you, so that you can't pump fuel when there's no electricity. And if you can't drive on the roads because of ice and snow, there's not much people can do for you. So you've got to take steps to get ahead of the curve whenever these types of events come on. So anyway, enough said on that. All right, so let's talk about what's next. On this episode, we're going to discuss the logic associated with a transfer switch and a power inlet. Let me just say that I had a plan and installed this with a preparation for 2 generators. Right now, I don't have my data analytics to suggest that I'm going to need that, and I want to be able to see if the soft start and the sure switch combination that we did in episodes 1 and 2 are going to actually provide me the performance that I may not need that second generator, but I'm prepared for it if I do need it. Especially for running air conditioning systems. That's the key point there that I'm trying to make. Okay, we're going to talk about tandem breaker logic and making room in a load center, okay, so that you can add these additional breakers to support the power inlets. And we're going to talk about cutting through the brick and the outer wall to get to the load center for the necessary wiring. We're going to pull the wire through, we're going to install and wire the relative breakers, and then we're going to install the interlock protection kit on the load center. And I can't stress enough safety. The interlock kit is a piece of plastic, $70, way overpriced for what it is, but it's something you need to make sure that you put on this, because you are actually paying this forward to the next guy. It's not about you. You probably will know that it's there and know what that breaker's for. It's the next guy that comes behind you that doesn't know that it's there and what it's for, and trying to trace those lines out in the walls and whatnot. I can't stress enough, do not ever put in any type of interconnection from a generator to a panel without having some way to separate and protect the safety of that connection. And so can't stress this enough. Okay. And then the last piece of this episode, we're going to talk about some of the watt meters that I installed. I went with a digital watt meter over the analog. Analogs are just rock solid, but they don't give you enough information, and time will tell whether or not I'm going to actually really like this. But for now, I wanted to make sure, because of some of the electronic equipment that I'm actually managing on my network here, that my frequency of power was accurate. I wanted to be able to see wattage. I wanted to be able to understand my amperage load that we're pulling through this. So this was something of a little bit more of an investment that I wanted to make. in time and effort, and hopefully it gives me the data that I'm looking for. Okay, so that's what we're going to cover today. I hope you stick around and enjoy the episode, and as always, like and subscribe if you do, and leave any comments below, and I'll try to get to them as soon as possible. Thanks. Okay, so this is a representation of the total loads that I'm actually monitoring or looking to actually provide for my home. What it represents is a sub panel that's off of the main panel. This will help you better understand when we get later into it why I'm looking at a transfer switch to be able to separate the two with two separate generators. I could always go for a more expensive total generator to cover the whole house, but you're talking anywhere from $4,000 to as much as $10,000. As you can see here, I'm into it for about $1,600. So let's talk about how to read this. The first thing we got to really talk about is the critical loads. What is it, if you lose power, what does the generator have to actually provide service for? In this case, for the sub panel, it's 4,019 watts, which represents network service equipment and refrigerators and freezers. For the main panel, we're talking about 2,837 peak watts, which represents some hot water heating as well as the additional refrigerators and freezers that I have. Now understand, both of these are peak watts, so I'm measuring the critical loads at peak, which there'll be substantial less at a nominal basis, but it's what I have to have in order to cover the startup of those compressors predominantly for those refrigerators and freezers. And though we'll talk about it more in the next episode when we get into the analytics side, this is a snapshot from Grafana to kind of show you the mean amperage and why these peaks are so important. Because if you don't have your peaks understood correctly, you're going to be tripping breakers. And when you're without electricity and tripping breakers and trying to figure out what's going on, it can be a very aggravating time. So it's important that you recognize and keep up with all of this. I'm by no means an expert in Grafana or Home Assistant. I'm still learning, but the data that you can pull out of this with tools from Circuit Setup for ESP Home and others that DigiBlur and the guys are teaching me on are phenomenal, and they'll tell you so much information to help you better understand and plan for your own home situation. And here at the bottom, we total everything up, and you see that this is how many additional watts that I have to be able to use aside from the critical loads. So why this is important is, as when I look at my critical loads, it shows me that I've got the ability to handle about 4,000 watts beyond my critical loads at a peak level, and 5,400 and some change at a nominal level. That's how much additional wattage that I can actually carry into other devices, lights, and other things on the network. So here's where we get interesting. The first two episodes, we spent a lot of time doing the Sure Switch and the soft starters in order to bring down the amperage load of the HVAC. But on paper here, even with those changes, it says that it's going to still require 8,783 watts in order to run it. Well, we don't have that much, as we clearly illustrated in our critical load differentiation at the bottom. So you should be asking, what gives? We've spent all this time getting to this point, and here you're clearly showing that you don't have enough watts in order to run this air conditioner. Well, that's why I've illustrated up front that I wanted to put a transfer switch in so that I could separate some of those loads so that I would have enough potential with another generator to be able to run my HVAC systems. But here's where it gets even further interesting. So on paper, we're supposed to see 31.7 amps even with the soft starter applied. My first initial test shows that we were doing a little over 16 amps. Either way, it's significantly different than the 102 locked rotor amps that we were expecting to see. So what does all this mean? What it means is you need to outline on paper what your expectations are going to be, set a plan so that if you don't hit those, you have a backup associated with how you're going to cover the overall amperage. But in my case, The data analytics may prove that I'm successful and can run a large majority of this off of the single generator with the overages that I have beyond my critical loads, but I won't know this until I actually get into it and start watching the HVAC and its performance. But either way, while I've got electricians on site and doing work, I can actually have them place the device for a few hundred extra dollars and not have to come back and then try to figure out how to rewire all this if my data is wrong. I will still be covered and be able to run the entire house. So to be clear, the nominal watts for running the HVAC 4917, that includes the blower fan, which is the number just above it. That's the total nominal wattage that I've got to have, which is within the current nominal difference that I have above my critical loads, but it's definitely not within where my critical loads are at peak. What really plays into this is all the compressors on the freezers and refrigerators and when they turn up and turn down relative to when they start and impact that air conditioning compressor. So that's part of the concern as far as being able to manage the timing of those and whether or not we want to go ahead and just invest in another generator just to handle that sub panel at a much less cost than trying to do a whole home. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everybody. And before I forget, one thing we could do if it's during the summer and we need to actually accommodate that difference of peak, we could always run the generator on gasoline instead of natural gas. You lose a little bit of performance, about 10% when you're running it on natural gas. I haven't tested that, but that is what we're looking for, and that's the numbers we've plugged in, and we will test that and validate that through our data analytics elements to make sure that we have a way to understand exactly what that performance criteria is going to look like. But push come to shove, we can throw gasoline in it, and we can run it and keep the peak and know that we've got the overage there to be able to maintain that in the event that it's 100 degrees here in Louisiana and we want to keep the air conditioners running. All right, let's get to the construction. The blue box there represents where we're going to place the 30 amp transfer switch and the 50 amp power inlet. They're just offset from the power meter, which is just behind the load center in my closet. And that's where we're going to be penetrating the brick and pulling the wire up into the load center. This is the wiring diagram that we're going to be applying for the two different transfer switches and the power inlet. The 50 amp will actually have its own breaker and it'll be attached to the interlock that we'll place on the load center from a safety standpoint. And the 30 amp is a pass-through to the sub panel, and it has a line and generator switch to it, but it'll have its own breaker as well. Now you see in the upper left hand corner there's some 110 volt LED lights. We have not installed those. We actually own these. We are looking to figure out the best way to fuse protect them, but we wanted to make sure that we had them available. We're going to use those as indicators that there's power on the circuit. So at any point that you want to go and plug into this thing, if it's lit up, it's already telling you there's power there. So we're wanting to make sure to create an additional safety layer, as well as we may put one on the inside to tell us when we have power restored from the main standpoint. Okay, we got one hole drilled here just below the meter. We're drilling the holes in the boxes before they're attached. Just getting everything basically lined up so that we can see exactly where everything's going to be, kind of marking it. And then we're going to drill the second hole to pull through the wiring for the 50 and the 30 amp respectively. So if you've never drilled through brick, you don't really actually have to have a hole saw in order to go through it. You can actually drill with a concrete bit several smaller holes around it. Basically, you're drilling on the edges until such time that you penetrate, and then you can actually just work out the circle. Then it's actually just lining the box up, making sure you got your hole lined just right. You got your wire through, you're marking where you're actually going to drill your anchor bits for the box itself. Always use the level to make sure you got it straight. You may hold that for you.
I should have got my better bit holder, but
Okay, Taylor's got the 50 amp inlet mounted, and he's got a piece of Simpull here that he's actually just using effectively as a pull string. And he's going to fish that through to the other side where Matt is at the load center, and he's going to then pull the wire through to attach to the respective breakers for the transfer switch as well as for the 50 amp inlet. This is another reason why I wanted to hire Russell's team to do this, because this is a two-man job. No matter how you do it, you've got to have somebody on the other side of this. And it's always best when you're pulling wire into your load center, you really want to have somebody there that's knowing what they're doing. And this is not something you want to just have some buddy next door working with you on unless they're qualified to do this kind of work. In my case, I just felt more comfortable actually getting Russell and his boys to come out and do this for me. Okay, let's speed things up a little bit, because what we're basically doing right now is just, finding the fish on the other side of it with Matt, and they're just going to pull the wire through. Okay, so Matt's going in here now, and he's pulling all these top level breakers off, and he's going to start making room in order to install the tandem breakers. This is going to be necessary because I don't have enough space in my load center currently in order to accommodate that. So he's installing these tandem breakers, collapsing two of the other units below it so that he's going to shift all these left-hand side heavy breakers for HVAC and some other ancillary equipment to where that topmost left breaker will be where my 50 amp power inlet will be located. So he's got to shift all this down in order to make the relative space. Now Matt's got the Simpull that Taylor's fished through to him, and they're going to be pulling the wire through that he'll attach to the breakers.
alright, I got your. Yeah. Give me a little bit more on them though.
I like the way they use their phones, and they key up a conversation so that they can stay in contact in real time as they're working through this without having to go through radios and other things. It's a real simple way to maintain that.
It's in here.
Don't let anyone ever fool you. This is complicated stuff. Good communication about exactly what you're pulling and what you're doing is always good, because this is a very complicated wiring procedure when you have a transfer switch and a power inlet, making sure that you understand exactly how you're going to separate the two loads elements on this. Okay, we're just going to speed up the video here just a little bit, but Matt's getting everything wired up and going to be attaching it to the respective breakers.
Alright, but the one with the white tape was a line right now.
So Russell's boys are awesome. They do great work.
It'll wire
And they've done a lot of other things for me in the past, but it's always good to have Russell on site as well, just overseeing everything, because this is a complicated procedure, and that's one reason why I brought these guys in, because I wanted to make sure this was done right and make sure that I'm covered all for any insurance elements that may come up, and making sure that something just wasn't missed relative to other components of my load center, and just have them just kind of looking over my shoulder is always just good prudence. Okay, so here's the load center, and I'm showing you the interlock safety switch that we put on the main panel. I've tried to do some labeling. Don't like what it looks like, but it's something to start off with. Here you're seeing the tandem breakers, where we made the slots and how we shifted everything down. Down here at the bottom, I've got a couple more that I've kind of called out, and this has been on for a while, but just highlighting it. It's an Eaton surge protector, just for those erroneous loads. I took a printout of my individual loads and put them inside of a plastic sleeve and taped them inside. That way I can always have them quick at hand whenever I need them. Alright, so let's freeze this. This is the digital meter that I use instead of an analog one. And what I've done here is I've actually put in a toggle switch with split core transformers on both the A and B phase of the breaker. And what this does, it allows me to see the actual amperage load as well as the number of watts and frequency for each phase of the breaker when I'm running it both on the generator. In this case, the 30 amp transfer switch is actually a pass-through. That looks good. Looks real good. That'll work out nice. Okay. So let's wrap up a little bit after this episode. I hope you found it enjoyable. Let's talk about some of the things that we covered off here. Basically, one thing that you need to do is understand your rough power utilization before investing $1. If you don't, you can make huge mistakes because you could be underpowered, overpowered. There's just not room for error in something like this. So take the time. You saw some of the schedules that I went through. Those schedules will vary because manufacturers' recommended usage will have some varying effects. And that's part of the data analytics piece that we're going to cover off in other episodes to kind of validate what that utilization is, because we have to know it, or at least I should say I have to know it in order to properly accommodate batteries for my system, because I don't want to buy big battery plants and having to maintain batteries. I'm wanting to have enough battery to keep my power in my own home without having to sell it back at a wholesale rate. Okay. From a demand standpoint, when you put a generator on your house, you have to continuously understand how much amperage load is being put on the generator for the safety of your equipment in the house, but also your generator. If you overload the generator, you start tripping breakers and you've got the wrong frequency on your generator, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong and cause other problems. So it's important that you understand what they are and monitor them during the entire cycle time of that generator usage. Okay. Again, you heard me throughout the video. Without a doubt, safety is the key things. These things will kill you. If you don't know what you're doing, you should not be attempting this, and you should consult a local electrician to help you with this. Be safe, install interlocks whenever possible. Be sure that you understand safety, label things appropriately. I've already labeled mine twice, and I'm about to do it a third time because I don't like the way it's describing the different load factors at different points. I want to be sure that whether it's myself, my wife, the next homeowner that takes over, a friend that comes over to help, whatever, I want them to understand exactly what these different interconnections look like and how to actually handle my panel. Okay. All right, so this episode completes the portion on the installation of a generator and the necessary wrap-up. In the next episode that's going to be coming, it's going to be a little farther out because we're in winter right now. And though the weather's starting to turn a little bit, by and large, what we're starting to see is that I need to run the air conditioners in order to ensure that we've got the right analytics coming out of the data to support what we're really looking for in the performance in order to understand whether or not a single generator will work for us. Okay, so that's going to be coming in the next episodes, and we're going to talk about Grafana and Home Assistant and working through a lot of the different components to make sure that we understand how this works. So I hope you'll stick around for that, and probably we'll try to get something out within the next couple 3 months, but until the actual weather changes, it'll be a little bit on that. But either way, be sure to comment and like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, and so that you can have notifications of when the next videos are coming. And by all means, plug some comments in there if you have questions or see something that you think is a better way of doing it. It always helps others, so that's what this game is about. How can we help you be more prepared for next time? So thank you for watching, and hope to see you on the next one. Take care. Finally, the snow is starting to melt on my roof and to melt off of the solar panels. Wasn't sure if it was ever going to melt off the way it was. The ground is nothing but ice at this point. Everything's starting to melt a little bit. Hey. Hey. What are you doing, sweet baby? Hello. What do you think about the snow? And the ice has turned into ice. Hello. Are you going to go use the bathroom? Are you going to go potty? Hi. Hello. Hello, my love. Hello, my love.